ไม่തോന്നുകയോ gathered here today. I, Ms. Lizette Costa, Assistant Professor in Economics, will be a compare consumer and making the consumer aware of their rights. The World Consumer Rights Day is commemorated on 15 March every year. Celebrating the day is a chance to demand that the rights of all consumers are respected and protected. Consumer to cover the field of e-commerce, direct selling, teleshopping, and other multi-levels of marketing in the age of digitization. According to Doug Sarro, and I quote, protection of consumers is not some populist, feel-good political abstraction. It's not red tape. It's not a drain on profits from a business. It's not just a zero-sum equation. Protection of consumers is the foundation of commerce, especially in the financial sector for fully functions of Vidya Vikas Mandal. The Department of Economics and Banking as Margam Goa National Webinar on Consumer Protection Act 2019. We have amongst our midst Advocate Elton Furtado as the resource person for today's webinar. Before we proceed, a humble request to all the participants to kindly mute their microphone and turn off their camera during the webinar. If any participant has any query, kindly post the same in the chat box, which will be addressed by
A very good afternoon to one and all, and a very warm welcome to the resource person of the day, Advocate Elton Furtado. Welcome, sir, to this campus, although it is only a virtual welcome for now. Next year, possibly when all this is over, we would be able to have you with us physically on the campus. I must congratulate the Department of Economics and Banking for organizing this webinar. And I must also inform everyone that this is the second webinar. Is somebody else speaking? Advocate Furtado, can you hear me?
Yes.
Is there anyone else speaking, or can you hear only me?
yes, ma'am.
I can hear only you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yes, so I must congratulate the Department of Economics and Banking because within the space of about 3 months, this is the second webinar that they are organizing on a very current topic. The previous one was on the farm laws, the 3 farm laws, which are today causing so much disturbance and so much agitation in the country. And today we have them organizing this Consumer Protection Act 2019, a long overdue piece of legislation because the earlier one had been amended time and again, but was unable to keep up with 2 things. One is the rising consumerism that we are seeing in all over the world and in the country, which is no exception. And also the newer channels of delivery that are being used for delivering products, that is goods as well as services, to consumers. So I think the new Consumer Protection Act, which Advocate Furtado will enlighten us about, is very much a new needed piece of legislation, repealing the earlier act. That act, when it came, was itself a landmark act. And now we have another one coming up. I was very happy to see that there are colleagues of mine from other colleges, from other departments of economics of other colleges. I welcome all of them, and I can see people from other states as well. And students, very happy to see you here, although your tests are starting on Monday. I had not expected to see many students present, but it's good to see that you can see the importance of a topic like this. So legal environment having a bearing on economics is something that everybody should understand, especially when you see economic legislations, which all of these are. So I really think the economics department needs commendation for bringing out the link between economic legislations and the study of economics. So with that, a very warm welcome, Advocate Furtado, to you once again, and to all those present. And I hope that we will have a very rewarding session today with lots of examples which will help us to understand the legislation better. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for your constant support and inspiration. I now request Assistant Professor Farah Mendonça to kindly introduce the resource person for today's national webinar.
Advocate Elton Fattad is a law graduate from VM Sargaonkar College of Law, Goa, and is a practicing advocate involved in civil litigation in the trial courts, High Court of Bombay at Goa, revenue courts, consumer forums, tribunals, and other authorities in the state of Goa. His main area of focus is inventory and succession laws of Goa, land laws of Goa, and family laws of Goa. However, having represented India in various international alternate dispute resolution competitions in countries like Vienna, Canada, and France during his years in law college, he strongly believes in approaching the court of law as a last resort only after exploring all modes of alternate dispute resolution like mediation, negotiation between his clients and the opposite parties, and the same is put to practice on a regular basis in his professional life. A warm welcome to you, sir. I now request you to please take over the session.
Thank you, Farah. Before we begin, can I have a sound test? Am I audible to everyone?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Thank you. Good afternoon to Professor Preeta Malia, Principal of Shree Damodar College of Commerce and Economics, Dr. Leera Gama, Head of Department of Economics and Banking, Ms. Farah Mendonça, the co-convener, all the members of the teaching faculty and students and all the others present here for this online webinar. The topic for today's webinar is Consumer Protection Act 2019. And to begin this webinar, I would like to start by quoting Mahatma Gandhi. I quote, A customer is the most important visitor on our premises. He is not dependent on us, we are dependent on him. He is not an interruption in our work, he is the purpose of it. He is not an outsider in our business, he is part of it. We are not doing him a favor by serving him, he is doing us a favor by giving us an opportunity to do so. Is my presentation being seen by everyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
No, sir, it's actually small. Can you enlarge it?
Just a minute.
Sir, click F5 option. Click F5 option.
Just a minute. Is it now visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
As we know, the Consumer Protection Act is very important for all of us because we all are consumers in some way or the other. And considering that this is the age of consumerism, considering that even the richest man in the world right now is the founder of Amazon, hence, consumerism plays an important role in all of our lives. And for that, it is very important for us to be aware of the Consumer Protection Act 2019. Another reason why it is important for all of us to be aware of this act is especially applicable to the economic students, because once you all graduate, many of you all will be entrepreneurs, will be businessmen, will be working in different multinational companies and other companies. And if at all your company is dealing with sale of goods or providing services, it is very important for you all to be aware of this act so that you all should not violate the provisions of this act or taken to task for violating the provisions of this act. So I'll begin this particular presentation on Consumer Protection Act by mentioning the objects and reasons of the act. The main object and reasons of the Consumer Act is to promote and protect the rights of the consumers. Now, what are these rights? The rights include to be protected against marketing of goods which are hazardous to life and property. What does this mean? If you know that alcohol is not allowed to be advertised, and you see most of the alcohol brands are advertised as soda or as water. Cigarettes are mandatorily required to have the packets with the picture which shows what are the consequences of smoking a cigarette. And these are something which have to be followed in order to protect the rights of the consumer. Another right which devolves upon the consumer is to be informed about the quantity, potency, purity, standard, and price of goods. And this is why all the products have MRP as well as ingredients mentioned on them. Another right which needs to be protected is to protect the consumer against unfair trade practices. Now, what is an unfair trade practice? A very good example was in the case of Rupasi Multiplex versus Mausi Chowdhury. In this particular case, the people coming to the multiplex were not permitted to carry their own water bottle. And the water bottle which had to be purchased in the multiplex was very exorbitant at its rate. And hence, the consumer court held that this is an unfair trade practice being conducted by the multiplex, and they were fined heavily. Another right which they need to be protected from is be assured wherever possible access to variety of goods at competitive prices. This is to avoid monopoly in the market, because when there is monopoly, the prices can be determined and increased at the whims and fancies of the manufacturers and service providers. Also, to be heard and be assured that the customer's interest will receive due consideration at appropriate forums, seek redressal against unfair trade practices or unscrupulous exploitation of consumers, and lastly, the right to consumer education. Now, today's webinar is certainly in the way of a right to consumer education, as it is educating the consumers on this particular rights that they have through the Act. Now, if we want to know the Consumer Act, it is important for us to know the concepts and definitions of the Consumer Act, starting with who is a complainant. Who can file a complaint under this Act? A complaint can be filed by a consumer or voluntary consumer association. Like in Goa, we have the Goa CAN, the Goa Civic and Consumer Action Network, which is founded by Roland Martins and is doing a tremendous job in the state of Goa to protect and promote the rights of the consumers. The state and the central governments as well can be complainants and can complain against any wrongs or any defects in any goods or services. So also, one or more consumers on behalf of the group of consumers having the same interest can also file a complaint. What does this mean? It is basically like a class action wherein few consumers can approach the consumer forum and file complaints even if that particular deficiency in service or defect in good is affecting a large number of consumers. Coming to who is a consumer. Now, a consumer is a person who hires or purchases goods or services for consideration. Now, this consideration can be in full or promised or partly paid or partly promised and includes a system of deferred payment. What does this mean? Now, in the present times, you see that many goods which are being sold online, there's an option for EMI payment system. What does this mean? That you pay a certain amount at the start and regularly every month you deposit the remaining amount. Now, this does not mean that if you only paid part of the price of the good, you cannot approach the consumer forum for any defect in that particular good. You definitely can, because the consumer definition includes consideration paid through a deferred payment system. But what is excluded from the definition of consumer? Now, a person who buys goods for resale or for any commercial purpose cannot be considered to be a consumer. And there's a further explanation given that says that commercial purpose excludes those earning their livelihood by means of self-employment. Now, a very good example of this would be in the state of Goa. We have a lot of taxi drivers. Now, if I go to buy a car to run it as a taxi, and I am going to drive it myself for my own livelihood, I'm self-employed, I would still be considered to be a consumer. And if there's any defect in the car which was sold to me, I can approach the consumer commission. But if I'm a person who buys, say, 10, 15 cars and runs a taxi business where I employ drivers to drive my car, I am conducting a business, and hence and hence just a minute. And hence, I cannot be considered to be a consumer. I cannot approach the court to say that the cars that are sold to me are defective because I am running and buying that particular goods for commercial purpose. Commercial purpose now exactly has to be defined on case-to-case basis. So depending on each case, that particular person can be considered to be a consumer or cannot be considered to be a consumer. Now, very unique case in this particular aspect is the case of Dr. Vijay Goel. And Dr. Vijay Goel had bought an ultrasound scanner and he had bought it for commercial purpose. But there was a defect in the ultrasound scanner, and that defect arose during the warranty period. The court still held that he is a consumer even though he had bought the ultrasound scanner for commercial purpose because the defect arose during the warranty period. Now, coming to who is a person who can approach the court. Now, as I had mentioned, a consumer has to be a person. A person could be an individual, a firm, whether registered or not, a Hindu undivided family, a cooperative society, a company, or any other person. Any of these people can approach the consumer forum if at all they feel their rights are violated. Now, the Act of 2019 widens the definition of goods, and the definition of goods specifically mentions food as
Excuse me,
defined.
sir. Sorry to interrupt, but the slides are not changing. Yes, now it did.
Just is it visible?
Sir, it's visible, but it's very small. If you could make it to full screen. Yes. Okay.
It's fine.
Yes, all good, sir.
Okay. So the Definite 19 Act to include food as defined in the Food and Standards Act 2006. Why is this definition expanded? This definition of goods has been expanded to make sure that the food delivery platforms come under the ambit of the Consumer Act. As we know, nowadays, Swiggy, Zomato are being used by consumers left, right, center. Every day, there are people ordering food on Zomato and Swiggy, and hence, it is very important to make these food delivery platforms liable under the Consumer Act. And hence, in the 2019 Act, the definition of food has been incorporated in the definition of goods. Coming to misleading advertisements. Now, the Consumer Act 2019 defines what are misleading advertisements. Are the slides being changed?
Sir, it's on slide 7.
Which says misleading advertisements?
It's on goods.
Okay, it's taking time to change. What about now? It's still on goods?
Yes, sir, it's still on goods. Yes, now it has changed to slide 8, misleading advertisements.
Okay, fine. Oh, so as I was mentioning, the misleading advertisements has been defined in the 2019 Act. And it says it falsely describes such product or service. Now, if you see a lot of advertisements mention that the products are organic, when actually the products contain a lot of artificial ingredients. And such advertisements can be considered as misleading advertisements. Also, there are a lot of advertisements like hand wash advertisements which say that 99%, 99.9% germs can be killed by using the hand wash. Toothpaste advertisements which mention that cavities won't come on your teeth if you use the toothpaste. The fairness creams, which are redefined as skin lightening creams. Earlier, there were advertisements which said you could get fairer by using these creams. Now, all these advertisements give a false guarantee to the consumers and can be considered as misleading advertisements. So also, if the advertisement conveys an express or implied representation, which, if made by the manufacturer or seller or service provider thereof, would constitute an unfair trade practice. Now, in the recent days, there was a big controversy in Goa with regards to Goa's first sex toy shop, which was started in Kalangut. Now, they started advertising this particular shop in such a manner that they convey to the consumer setup with all legally applicable permission, which wasn't the case. And hence, if at all someone files a complaint against them for misleading advertisements, they can be taken to task. Coming to the two-type, making celebrity endorsers liable for advertising brands. Now, in the recent days and recent months, we have seen that most of the Bollywood stars and celebrities were taken to task for advertising brands which are violating the consumer law, where there are misleading advertisements, such as when Pierce Brosnan was advertising Pan Bahar. He apologized, saying that he wasn't aware that he was actually advertising tobacco product. There was a controversy and cases filed against Mr. Bachchan for advertising Maggi noodles. And even Dhoni was taken to task for advertising and endorsing Amrapali Group housing projects, which was actually in a big controversy with regards to not providing the flats and the houses to the customers in time. Now, the 2019 Act specifically makes a provision that celebrity endorsers can be also taken to task. And how can they be taken to task? Is they can be taken to task by fining them up to 10 lakhs for the first offense and 50 lakhs for every subsequent offense. Further, there can be a ban on such celebrity endorsers from advertising any products for up to 1 year for the first offense and up to 3 years for subsequent offenses. Now, the only defense that can be taken by the celebrity endorsers is of due diligence, is that they have done their due diligence with regards to the advertisements and found that the advertisements are not misleading and hence they shouldn't be taken to task. Now, since due diligence is a very vague concept and is not defined in the Consumer Act, this could be a loophole for the celebrity endorsers to avoid liability. But at least it is a good step by the government to ensure that the celebrity endorsers can also be taken to task. Coming to another very unique feature of the 2019 Act is that of product liability. Now, product liability basically means that if at all a product is defective, the manufacturer, the product service provider, and the product seller can all be taken to task. Now, this product liability concept arose because earlier the product manufacturers used to take the defense that they have not sold the product to the consumer. Because once the product is manufactured by the manufacturers, they would send it to the retailers or the distributors, who in turn would sell it to the consumers. The consumer is buying a retailer and hence would take the defense saying that we are not liable because we have not sold it to the consumer. But introducing the product liability concept in the 2019 Act, the liability is majorly on the manufacturers, even if they are not negligent or fraudulent in making the express warranty of a product. The liability can also be on e-commerce platforms, and they cannot take the defense that they are merely platforms or aggregators, and hence they can also be taken to task. Now, an example of product liability would be defective cars. You might have noticed in the news that many of these cars are taking back the cars to their showroom because of defective parts, like defective airbags and defective other equipments of the cars. There was one case wherein the steering of the car was defective and which led to the death of the consumer. And the court held that the manufacturer, along with the distributor, were all liable for the defect. Now, one of the exceptions for product liability is if the product is misused, altered, or modified. A very good example would be when I purchase a car and I modify that car to my own whims and fancy. Now, later, if there's any defect found, the manufacturer or the service provider or the product distributor seller cannot be taken to task and cannot be held liable because I have modified the car. Now, coming to the concepts of unfair trade practice and unfair contract. Now, as I mentioned earlier, unfair trade practice includes misleading advertisements, not issuing memos and bills, failing to take back defective goods and refund, failing to refund amount. These all fall within the scope of unfair trade practice. What is an unfair contract? An unfair contract is a contract which is one-sided and favors the manufacturers and the service providers, especially like the real estate companies, the banks, the e-commerce portals. By unfair contract, I mean which contracts where there is an unfair penalty imposed on the consumer, an unfair security deposit, which is a big amount, or a unilateral provision where only the manufacturer or the service provider can terminate the contract and not the consumer. This all would be considered to be an unfair contract, and such unfair contracts also come within the scope of violations of the Consumer Act 2019. Now, as we know, the 2019 Act was specially enacted because of the changing times. The changing times wherein all the shopping or most of it is being done online through e-commerce portals. And this is the reason the Consumer Act specifically makes e-commerce rules which are applicable to all e-commerce portals, including foreign entities situated outside India but supplying goods and services to India. Now, all these e-commerce portals have to mandatorily mention the refund policy, the warranty, the exchange rules, the payment options, tracking info, shipment details. All of this has to mandatorily be mentioned by the e-commerce portals on their websites and their portals. Also, it is made mandatory that e-commerce portals must appoint a grievance officer, and such grievance officer must answer and acknowledge complaints and queries within 48 hours of the complaint or query being lodged. And further, within 1 month, such complaints need to be redressed. And all these provisions are made mandatory, and the e-commerce portals, if at all they do not follow these provisions, will be taken to task. Coming to the Central Consumer Protection Authority, which is constituted under the new Act of 2019. Now, this Central Consumer Protection Authority has a chief commissioner and other commissioners. Now, what is their duty? Their duty is to regulate, protect, and enforce the interests of the consumers. And they also have the power to inquire, investigate, and take actions against violations of the 2019 Act. And specifically, they have an investigation wing headed by the Director General. So this particular authority can investigate any violations of the 2019 Act which are going on. They can conduct an investigation, and they themselves can also file complaints in the consumer forum. And once these investigations are done, and if the manufacturers or service providers are found guilty, they can be fined or even there can be imprisonment. Now, coming to what is a complaint. A complaint includes a complaint for defective goods and deficiency of services. Now, defective goods, you may understand what is a defective good. If a fridge is sold to you and the door of the fridge suddenly collapses and is not fixed properly, it is a defective good. But what is a deficiency of service? A very good example of a deficiency of service would be the Indigo Airlines. Now, if you are supposed to board a flight from Delhi to Mumbai, and 2 days before boarding the flight, the Indigo Airlines sends you a message saying that your flight has been rerouted from Mumbai to Chandigarh and Chandigarh to Delhi, and the waiting period at Chandigarh is 10 hours compared to the other waiting period that you normally have of 2-3 hours. And at the 10-hour waiting period, you are not provided any meals or you're not given a lounge to wait for 10 hours. This can be considered to be deficiency of service on part of the Indigo Airlines, and a complaint can be filed against Indigo for such deficiency of service. A complaint can be also filed for charging a price in excess of the price fixed. It may be MRP or any other price fixed. If the charging is more than that, the manufacturers, the sellers can be taken to task. A very important case in this regard is the big cinemas versus Manoj Kumar. In this particular case, again, the water bottle, which was the MRP was rupees 16, was being sold at rupees 30. And the court held that this is exorbitant rate which is being quoted and priced for the water bottle, and hence the big cinemas multiplex was taken to task and was given a fine and penalty to pay. Now, a complaint can be also filed if goods which are dangerous to life and safety are being offered for sale to the public in contravention of the standards relating to safety of such goods. Now, what does this mean? Now, as you know, alcohol and cigarettes are not permitted to be given to underage minors. And if at all the wine stores or any shops which are selling cigarettes actually sell such products to minors below 18 years, then they can be taken to task and a complaint can be filed against them. So also complaints can be filed for hazardous services and a claim for product liability. Now coming to a period of limitation for filing complaint. Now once a defective good is given to you all or there's a deficiency of service, you do not have your entire life to file a complaint. You have only 2 years from the date on which the cause of action has arisen. And within the 2 years, you have to file a complaint. If you do not file a complaint, it can be considered to be barred by time. Now, any complaint filed beyond 2 years could be entertained by the district consumer forum or other consumer forums only if sufficient cause is provided for not filing this complaint within the 2 years. Now, since 2 years is a huge period, it is very rarely accepted that a complaint cannot be filed within the 2 years, and hence any complaints which are filed beyond the 2 years are normally rejected as being barred by time. Now, where can we file a consumer complaint? There are 3 different authorities. That is the District Consumer Disputes Redressal Commission, the State Consumer Dispute Redressal Commission, and the National Consumer Dispute Redressal Commission. Now, starting with the District Consumer Dispute Redressal Commission. This district commission, the composition is of 1 president and not less than 2 members. And what is the jurisdiction of this district commission? Now, the pecuniary jurisdiction, that is, the value of the complaints cannot exceed 1 crore. The 1986 Act provided only up to 20 lakhs. So all the complaints which were up to 20 lakhs could be filed before the district commission. But now to the 2019 Act, it has been expanded and complaints up to 1 crore rupees can be filed in the district commission. Now, how this 1 crore can be determined? According to the 1986 Act, the value of the goods and services as well as the compensation was considered. So if at all the value of the goods which were defective, say is 5 lakhs, and I am claiming compensation of 30 lakhs, then the situation arose that my claim was beyond 20 lakhs. So I would have to approach the state commission and I could not approach the district commission because the district commission, as per the 1986 Act, was the value was only up to 20 lakhs. So this created a lot of problems. And hence in the 2019 Act, it has been changed to only value of goods or services paid as consideration. So if the goods and services that are paid for are below 1 crore rupees, I can file a complaint in the district commission, even though I'm claiming a compensation which is beyond 1 crore. that does not stop me from approaching the district commission. So that is one good change in the 2019 Act, which has expanded the jurisdiction. Now, what is the territorial jurisdiction of the district commission? Now, if at all the complaint, the cause of action arose wholly or partly in a particular place, the complaint can be filed in that particular place, or whether opposite party resides or works for gain or has a branch office. So what does this mean? So basically it means that if I have a complaint against, say, Air India, and Air India has a branch office only in Mumbai and it does not have a branch office in Goa. The cause of action also arose in Mumbai because the flight was from Mumbai to Delhi. I could file a consumer complaint only in Mumbai and I could not file it in Goa. Now, this particular problem has been solved in a 2019 Act because the 2019 Act includes a place where the complainant resides or works for gain. So I am residing in Goa, even though the cause of action arose in Mumbai and the branch office of Air India is in Mumbai, I can still file a complaint in Goa, and that is a positive change in the 2019 Act. Now, what is the procedure once you file a complaint? Now, a complaint can be an e-complaint, and you have to pay a particular court fee upon each of the complaints. Now, once that is done, it is also important to mention that 2019 Act exempts complaints up to 5 lakhs from the court fees. This is a very good step because this lessens the burden on the consumer in approaching the consumer forum. So if I'm approaching the consumer forum for something which is small in nature, a complaint which is below 5 lakhs rupees, then I'm exempt from paying any particular fees on that particular complaint. Now, once a complaint has been filed, there is a stage of admission. What is a stage of admission? It basically means that the commission will check whether the complaint is admissible or not. And if it is admissible, it will be admitted. If the commission finds that it is not admissible, it will reject the complaint. But it can reject only after hearing the complaint. So if the complainant still cannot convince the commission that the complaint is admissible, the complaint will be rejected. Now, this admissible stage or stage of admission is given only 21 days according to the Act. So within the 21 days, the commission has to admit or reject the complaint. If it does not do so, then the complaint is deemed to be admitted, which is something good in nature because it does not delay the complaint and the proceeding. Now, once a complaint is admitted, any element which exists in the particular dispute, then the commission can ask the parties whether they want to refer the dispute for mediation. Now, what is mediation? Mediation is an alternate dispute resolution mode of settlement. It means that a mediator is an independent person who is appointed, who facilitates a dialogue between the complainant and the opposite party to come to a solution to resolve the dispute. And hence, if the parties are agreeing to dispute to mediation, bid for such mediation, if the parties say no, we are not in dispute to mediation, then the normal. What happens is actually referred to mediation. When it is referred to mediation, there are consumer mediation cells which are set up and established in various district forums. So at this particular cell, different sessions are organized wherein a dialogue takes place between the complainant and the opposite party. And if at all they come to a settlement, that settlement is written on paper, and then the settlement is put forth before the district commission, and then the commission goes ahead to decide that matter based on that particular settlement. Now, if at all a settlement fails, or if at all the parties do not agree to settlement, then the matter proceeds normally as per the procedure. Now, what is the procedure when it comes to complaint related to goods. When it is complaint related to goods, the complainant is given 30 days or maximum another 15 days, that is 45 days, to give their written statement. Now, what is the written statement? Is basically a reply to the complaint filed by the complainant. And within the 45 days, they have to file this reply. Now, what happens if the defect in goods cannot be determined? If the defect in goods cannot be determined, then such goods are sent to appropriate laboratory for inspection. Now, the central government has laboratories as per the different types of goods. If at all the defect has to be ascertained, are sent to such laboratories. And they are given 45 days to prepare a report and submit it back to the district consumer forum. And once they submit the report, the complainant as well as the opposite party are asked for a say on the report. What do they think of the report, whether it's acceptable to them, whether it's not acceptable to them. And thereafter, the district consumer forum hears arguments and then passes a decision. Now, with regards to complaints related to service, the same procedure is followed, except there is no inspection when it comes to services. Now, also, a very important process during the whole system of when the complaint is filed in the district consumer forum is with regards to evidence. Now, evidence needs to be led as to show that actually the complaint is maintainable and the opposite parties are liable to be paying a compensation. Now, that is done by documentary evidence or an affidavit. An affidavit is a written document which is sworn on oath. The complainant mentions his case and the opposite party mentions their case. And based on this affidavit as well as documentary evidence, the district commission passes a decision. But if at all the complainant or the opposite party wishes to lead oral evidence, what do I mean by oral evidence? Oral evidence means if they want to call a witness and the witness is put in a witness box, he's asked questions which he needs to reply to, and there's something called as a cross-examination which takes place. If at all a complainant or an opposite party wants to do that and wishes to that, they have to request the district consumer forum to allow them. And it is upon the discretion of the district consumer forum whether to allow such a request or to reject such a request. Now, the time period to dispose of all the complaints as per the 2019 Act is 3 months if there is no testing required. Now, this 3 months is from the date the opposite party receives a notice of the court. And the time period is 5 months to dispose of the complaint if there is a testing required. That is, if the goods are sent to the laboratory for testing. Now, if at all, due to some reasons, the district consumer forum cannot decide the matter within 3 months or within 5 months, then such reasons have to specifically mention as to why they could not dispose of the complaint within the specified period of time. So also there are interim orders which can be passed by the district consumer forum. Now, what do I mean by interim orders? By interim orders, I mean if there is a defective product being sold in a market and I am aggrieved, I am a complainant, I file a complaint. Now, I can request the district consumer forum to restrain the distributor or the seller from selling the defective products until this particular complaint is decided. Why? Because that defective product, once it goes out in the market, it can affect large number of other consumers. And hence, I can ask that an interim order be passed that such seller is not permitted to sell the particular product or provide that particular service until the particular complaint filed by me is decided. And if the consumer forum considers that it is appropriate to pass such an interim order, it will do so. Now, coming to defenses which can be taken by the opposite party. Now, once a complaint has been filed by the complainant, the opposite party can take several defenses to counter the complaint of the defendant. One is a defense of no locus standi. By no locus standi, I mean that the complainant has no authority to come before the consumer forum since he is not a consumer. This can be a defense taken by the opposite party. Another defense that can be taken by the opposite party is voluntary non-fit injury, which basically means that the injury caused to the consumer was due to his own fault. Suppose there is a modification done to a car, and then there's a defect found in the car, and there's an accident because of the defect. The opposite party can take the defense that the accident took place because of the modification done by the complainant himself. Another defense that can be taken by the complainant is that of the complaint being time barred. What do I mean by this is that it is not filed within 2 years time period which is provided to the complainant to file the complaint. Another defense that can be taken by them is a dispute involves complicated questions of fact. Now, if a dispute between the complainant and the opposite involves complicated questions of fact, the consumer forum will most definitely not entertain such a complaint and will tell the consumer to approach the civil court, wherein the process is longer and proper evidence is laid wherein the matter can be decided, appreciating the complicated questions of fact. So also, if a dispute is already pending before some other court, the opposite party can take the defense that the consumer forum cannot entertain such a complaint because the dispute is already pending before some other court. Also, the fact that the court, that is the consumer forum, does not have the pecuniary or the territorial jurisdiction to entertain such a complaint can be taken as a defense by the opposite party. Now, all our other defenses also can be taken, such as service not for consideration, maybe in a government hospital. So if at all a service is provided free of cost, and that service cannot be considered to be a violation of the Consumer Act because there is no consideration, there's no money being paid to the opposite party. So also a defense that the goods or the services provided was for commercial purpose can be taken by the opposite party. Now coming to what can be the findings and the orders of the consumer forum. Now, the Consumer Act only provides for certain findings and orders which can be passed by the consumer forum. Now, if at all the findings and orders do not fall within these clauses, then the consumer forum cannot pass a decision, which includes to remove the defect as pointed out by the laboratory, to replace the goods with new goods of similar description, to return to the complainant the price plus interest, if any, to pay compensation for negligence, to pay such amount as may be awarded by it as a compensation in product liability cases, to remove the defects in goods and deficiency in services, to discontinue the unfair trade practice or restrictive trade practice, not to offer the hazardous or unsafe goods for sale, or to withdraw the hazardous goods from being offered for sale. So also, the other findings could be to cease and desist from manufacturing and offering of hazardous goods and services, to pay compensation for a large number of consumers who are not identifiable conveniently, to issue corrective advertisements, to provide for adequate costs to parties, and to cease and desist from issuing any misleading advertisement. Now, all these findings and orders can be passed by the consumer forum. So if a complaint has been filed by me and the complaint is seeking from the consumer forum to pass any order or any direction which does not fall within these above mentioned clauses, then the consumer forum can refuse to entertain such a consumer complaint because they have a limited scope of passing an order and direction, and hence they cannot pass very complicated directions which cannot be enforced by them. Coming to the power of the district consumer forum of review. Now, if an order is passed by a district consumer forum and they find that there's an error apparent on the face of the record, either of its own motion or on an application made by any of the parties within 30 days from such order, the forum, the district consumer forum, can review its own order and pass a subsequent order. Now, if any person is aggrieved by such an order of a consumer forum, it can appeal to the state commission. Now, the state commission in Goa is located in Panjim, and this particular appeal from the district commission can be filed on the grounds of facts or law within 45 days from the date of the order. Now, a very important thing to be noted is if I am an aggrieved party, the district consumer forum has ordered me to pay the complainant 50 lakhs rupees. Now, if I want to file an appeal in a state commission, I have to mandatorily deposit 50% of the compensation amount. That is 25. If it is the compensation is 10 lakhs, I have to deposit at least 5 lakhs in the court. And if I do not do so, I cannot file an appeal. And only after I do so, I can file an appeal before the state commission. Further, no appeal can be filed if a matter has been settled through mediation. As I had mentioned earlier, if a matter is settled in mediation through the dialogue between the parties and a mutual agreement between the parties, that cannot be challenged to an appeal in the state commission. Now, coming to the state commission, a state commission is composed of the president and not less than 4 members. And what is its jurisdiction? Now, earlier, as per the 1986 Act, jurisdiction was only complaints up to rupees 1 crore. So, if the value of the goods and services was up to 1 crore, you could file a complaint for the state commission. Now, this has been expanded through the 2019 Act, and it says that any complaint which exceeds 1 crore but does not exceed rupees 10 crores, that the complaint can be filed in the state commission. Why this is important is, at least in Goa, for us, Goa is small. So for us, the state commission is situated in Panjim. So if at all the complaint is beyond a certain amount and we have to file it in the state commission, maximum we'll have to go to Panjim. But the states which are large in size and huge in size, if at all a complaint is beyond a certain amount and can be only entertained by the state commission, the person would have to go all the way to the state capital, which could be very far away from his home place, and which could again create a lot of problems. So hence, now the complaint scope has been expanded to up to rupees 10 crores, and up to rupees 10 crores, a complaint can be filed in the state commission, and below 1 crore has to be filed in the district commission. Now, also complaints against unfair contracts, which does not exceed 10 crores, can be filed in the state commission. So, as I mentioned earlier, unfair contracts are one-sided contracts which are entered into between the consumer and, say, suppose a bank or a insurance company or even an e-commerce portal. These complaints are one-sided in nature to a certain extent. And if at all I am aggrieved by it, and if that particular contract does not exceed 10 crores, I can file a complaint in the state commission. Also, coming to appeal to the state, to the national commission. So, if an order has been passed by the state commission and I am aggrieved by the order, again I can approach the national commission, and this I approach only within 30 days from the order being passed. Deposit 20 lakhs rupees to I've been awarded. I've been told to now a claim will apply if next rupees in the court before I file the appeal before the National Commission. Now, what is the second appeal? A second appeal is basically if I am aggrieved by the order of the district consumer forum and I go and appeal to the state commission. And the order of the state commission is also not to my liking, and I want to further appeal from that order. And that appeal is permitted, and it's called a second appeal, and is permitted before the National Commission only if there's a substantial question of law. Now, what do I mean by substantial question of law? A substantial question of law is basically if there is a question whether the person can be considered to be a consumer as per law, or any other question of law which is substantial, then only the National Consumer Commission will entertain such a second appeal. Appeals merely based on facts won't be entertained by the National Commission as second appeal. Now, orders which are passed. Now, suppose the complaint is about 10 crores and it is filed in a National Consumer Commission and an order is passed against me. I still have the right to appeal from such an order, and that appeal will lie to the Supreme Court. And that appeal will have to be filed within 30 days from the order being passed by the National Commission. So this particular remedy ensures that even if the complaint is of a huge amount, about 10 crores, and it is filed in a national commission, it does not curtail the appealing power of the aggrieved party to approach the Supreme Court from the order of the National Commission. Now, this is one concept in the Consumer Act which I am not personally in favor of, because it mentioned that enforcement of the orders of the state, district, as well as the national commissions will be done as per the Civil Procedure Code, which is something called as an execution proceeding, which basically means that if an order is passed against me to pay a compensation of 50 lakhs to the complainant, if I do not do so, the complainant will again have to approach the court and file an execution proceedings to execute that order of 50 lakhs in order to compel me to pay that 50 lakhs to the complainant, which is something which is a waste of time, I feel, which there should be a procedure wherein directly the orders of the consumer forum can be complied with, and they will not file a particular uh, case again for execution of that particular order. Now, any act will be toothless and would not be taken seriously if the offenses and penalties are not stringent. And hence, it is also very important for us to know of the offenses and penalties which are specified in the Consumer Act 2019. Now, non-compliance of orders can lead to an imprisonment up to from 1 month to 3 years, or a fine from rupees 25,000 to 1 lakh, or both. A non-compliance of orders of the central authority could lead to an imprisonment up to 6 months, or fine up to 20 lakhs, or both. Misleading or false advertisements, if someone is doing a misleading advertisement, there can be imprisonment up to 2 years and a fine up to 10 lakhs for the first offense. And subsequent offense, there can be imprisonment up to 5 years and fine up to 20 lakhs. Now, there are penalties for also products which are adulterated. Now, if such adulterated products cause no injury, there can still be imprisonment up to 6 months and they can be fined up to 1 lakh. And if there's any injury not amounting to grievous hurt, there can be a imprisonment up to 1 year and fine up to 3 lakhs. If there's a grievous hurt caused to the consumer, the imprisonment is up to 7 years and fine up to 5 lakhs. While if at all there is a death caused to the consumer, there can be an imprisonment from 7 years to life imprisonment and a fine not less than 10 lakhs. Now, if you see this, these are stringent penalties and which are provided if at all there is a violation of the act. Now, so also if there's a first offense, there can be a suspension of the license up to 2 years. And for subsequent offenses, there can be cancellation of the licenses of the service providers and the product manufacturers. So also the similar case arises with regards to spurious goods. If there's an injury or not amounting to grievous hurt, there can be a imprisonment up to 1 year and fine up to 3 lakhs. If there's a grievous hurt caused, there can be imprisonment 7 years, up to 7 years, and fine up to 5 lakhs. And if there's a death caused, again, it's a very heavy penalty, that is 7 years to life imprisonment and fine not less than 10 lakhs. Now, I would like to conclude my today's webinar with a few landmark case laws, which are very important to keep in mind. Now, there's this case law of HDFC Bank versus Balwinder Singh. Now, in this particular case law, there was a loan and a hypothecation of a particular vehicle. And the HDFC Bank, to take repossession of the hypothecated vehicle, they sent some musclemen and goons to the house of the consumer. And the consumer court held that a heavy fine has to be imposed on the bank for indulging in such a practice. Further, there's a case of Dr. Arvind Shah versus Kamlaben Kushwaha, wherein the son died due to a wrong prescription of medicine. Now, the state commission held that the doctor was negligent for not mentioning the symptoms or the diagnosis of the ailments. So basically, the doctor only provided what medicines had to be taken. But in his prescription, he did not anywhere mention about the symptoms of the patient or the diagnosis of his ailment. And hence, the state commission held that he had not fulfilled the duties which are imposed upon him under the medical rules. And hence, the state commission imposed a penalty of 5 lakhs. But it was reduced to 2.5 lakhs by the National Commission, stating that the doctor is definitely negligent, but it cannot be entirely held liable for the death of the patient. So also there's a case of Sehgal School of Competition versus Dalbir Singh, wherein the complainant sought a refund from the coaching school after only 1 year of the 2-year course. And the ground was that the coaching provided by the school was not up to the mark. And the court held that the refund was permitted, even though the contract entered between the Sehgal School of Competition and the consumer was such that the consumer was not permitted to terminate any such contract and seek a refund. But the court held that the contract was an one-sided one and an unfair contract, and hence the school was liable to refund that particular amount of fees. So also there's a case of medical superintendent in Gregorius Mission Hospital versus Jesse and another, wherein a man who was undergoing alcoholic psychosis treatment for de-addiction of drugs committed suicide in the hospital itself. The court held that the hospital authorities were definitely liable for negligence because none of the nurses or ward boys or doctors were around to notice that the patient went from his room to another room and committed suicide, and hence it was held that there was a negligence on part of the hospital in providing services to the family of the deceased person. And lastly, I would like to cite a judgment which is related to my own field. An advocate in a case of Narendra Kumar Suneja versus R.K. Goel was held liable and was told to refund the fee provided by the client because the fee was provided for a particular work and the advocate failed to do that particular work. And hence, the client was permitted to seek a refund from the advocate of the fees that the client had provided to the advocate. So by this, I would like to end today's webinar. And if at all anyone has any particular question, then please ask.
Thank you, sir, for your insightful session and valuable input. We shall now proceed to the Q&A session. I request Assistant Professor Ms. Preeti Pereira to take over.
Good afternoon, everyone. So, moving to our question and answer session. So, Abhinav Apte is asking, is there any WhatsApp community which has a members who are active in pursuing consumer rights and keep filing cases with the consumer forum?
It depends from place to place. Every state, every city has a lot of these voluntary consumer associations which are formed, and they have definitely have WhatsApp groups wherein if there is any consumer which is aggrieved by a particular defect of goods or deficiency of service, can approach these associations, and on behalf of such consumers, such associations take up the matter before the appropriate forum. Like in Goa, we have the Goa Can, as I mentioned earlier, which is a very active voluntary consumer association which is functioning in Goa, which is led by Mr. Roland Martins. And they take up such cases and approach the relevant authorities if there is any deficiency of service or defect of goods. And such things are happening all over India.
Can I just further on that question?
Sure.
Yeah, so my question was specifically for Goa and to understand whether there is a database or any case studies that are in Goa, so that every consumer, see for what happens is like a person A might go through the entire grind, and person B does not know that the person A has gone through that grind, no, and he was successful or he failed in that particular thing. So if that case study is available for everybody to see, maybe similar people, having similar problems can contact that person and understand what was his experience and learn from that experience and build on it, and it would be easier for them to file such cases. So is there any database in Goa or any community in Goa which a citizen driven which learns from each other and helps each other in this matter?
There is no particular database which is available which directly mentions and cites all the particular cases which are decided and which are going through the consumer forums in Goa. But definitely the consumer forums itself have an online website, and in these websites each and every judgment is available for perusal. So such websites of the consumer forums can be you can log into their website, basically click on their website, and a lot of judgments and especially landmark judgments are mentioned on such websites where you can peruse it and read and understand it. Otherwise, also, as I mentioned, Goa Can is a very active citizen-driven association. And if at all any particular person goes through any particular problem with regards to a consumer violation, can approach it, and they are very active in dealing with such situations and guiding the person on how to go about with the case.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. The one more question is from Josephine Fernandez. What are the procedures for registration of NGOs or trust legally for Divyangang person?
I didn't get the question, the last part.
What are the procedures for registration of NGOs or trust legally for Divyangjan person?
No, see, I'm not very well versed with registration of particular trust or association. So basically, there are separate acts which are provided for registration of societies as well as trusts. So if any particular person wants to register such trusts and associations, can approach the relevant authorities, that is the Society General, the Cooperative Society Generals, as well as even the trust authorities, and they can register such trust or associations or societies if at all they want to go ahead and form such societies for the purpose of consumer awareness or consumer protection.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Preeti. All good things come to an end. And to officially culminate this national webinar, I now request the convener and head of Department of Economics and Banking to kindly deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Lizette. Good afternoon, Advocate Furtado and participants. I'm happy to propose the vote of thanks. First and foremost, my sincere gratitude to our resource person, Advocate Elton Furtado, for willingly accepting our invitation to speak on this very important and relevant topic of this webinar. So I must say that your presentation on the said topic was very enriching and informative. A sincere word of appreciation to all the participants. Your wholehearted response has made this webinar successful. I'm confident that you all have gained considerably from our resourceful speaker. Back home, Vidya Vikas Mandal celebrates glorious 50 years as a pioneer in the field of commerce education in Goa. So I say a big thank you to our Mandal's management principal and vice principal for supporting and promoting such initiatives. Words of appreciation to my vibrant fellow colleagues who always believe in teamwork works. Yet again, we together have made it possible. The technical staff of our college for your support. Lastly, my department colleagues, your innate nature of hard work, commitment, and perfection have again added yet another feather to our department. Once again, thank you all. Have a nice day.
Thank you, ma'am, for your constant motivation and encouragement. With this, we come to the end of the webinar. Request all participants to kindly turn on their cameras for a photograph. Kindly turn on your cameras for a photograph.
Hello?
Yes, thank you.